Welcome to the Fabric of America, the podcast that celebrates small businesses and the remarkable stories that weave our communities together. We're your hosts, Melissa Otto
and Matt Banover.
Matt is a fashion designer passionate about storytelling through style.
And Melissa is a seamstress on a mission to make sewing cool again and inspire the next generation. We sit down with small business owners, artisans, and dreamers to uncover the stories behind their brand, what inspires them, challenges them, and keeps them creating.
Because we believe that behind every idea, every design, every stitch, there's a story worth sharing. So grab a drink from your favorite local shop and join us as we weave together conversations about passion, perseverance, and the power of small business. So, Matt, we talk all the time about
Melissa.
Always doing that to me. We talk all the time about making stuff in America.
Yes, we do.
And like the actual process of making something in America. And I have been following the Anne Barge collection of wedding dress brands. They have a couple of, we'll call it diffusion lines and other things going on there. But I really was so excited for us to get to talk to Shawne Jacobs, who has been at the helm of Anne Barge for, I think, 20 years, 25 years. And why I wanted to talk to her was because I had heard through the grapevine that after COVID and all of the struggles with getting product from overseas, they kind of said, all right, enough is enough. We're going to start making some stuff here and really diversify our manufacturing portfolio. And they did.
Yeah.
And in this day and age and in the current climate and with everything kind of going on the way it has been, I'm very intrigued to hear from her what it's like, but how the struggles continue. There's some really interesting realities that happen.
This conversation was awesome. So
Yeah, it was.
I didn't know Shawne. You brought her on. Thank you very much. And as soon as she started talking about domestic manufacturing, I feel like she and I just went off.
Oh, you guys were in your own.
We were
clique
going
over
on
there.
and on and on and on. And it was.
I was just the third wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. But it was so interesting because when we started this podcast, it was very much like, let's give a platform to our friends and family and people who are doing it. And now it felt like, and this was such a good conversation. Mitch was like it also,
Yes.
where it's like, oh, let's like really get to the core of what it means to make things here and what it's like getting a pulse check on manufacturing in America, what it's like, the struggles, the trials. It's not as simple as I want to make more money, so I ship my production overseas.
Right.
It's not like that. It's what does it look like to bring it here? What are the benefits? What are the pros? What are the cons? Shawne just delivers. She's
the best, I'm telling you.
She was like a movie star written for, like, I just felt like we were interviewing a titan.
Yeah.
Like
she was made for our thesis with this podcast.
Yeah, and not
like.
just what she says, how she conducted herself, how she answered questions. I was just like, you should be on every documentary, every news, the way you
She's
are.
like perfect for speaking and interviewing. She delivers a message so flawlessly. But enough of hearing us talk about how she delivers the message. We're going to let you hear it right from her. Here is Shawne Jacobs of Anne Barge on the Fabric of America.
Melissa, I'll have to say your videos on Instagram have been great. I was just sharing them with our seamstress here in Atlanta. Yeah. And I think the one tip the reel was like just showing, how to measure. Yeah. And like, I liked that you said, to have them take a deep breath and then let out. I think it's so like your videos, I feel like bridal stores need to show their stylists, especially when they have a new stylist coming in, like how do you properly measure? Like,
well, Shawne, I would love for you. I'm going to sidekick you real quick and hit this podcast. So I started we'll call it a course, but basically it's a series. I called it Weducated, which is all of those So the audience is meant to be bridal retailers, and it's so hard, like, in the vacuum trying to get these things started, but if you ever feel like there's a retail space that might benefit, I would love to connect and share the good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love for you to send me that link. I'd love to look at the content and then put an email together for our retailers and say, you need to be following this. You need to have your stylist look at this. Just because it would help us out so much on the measuring side when, I feel like we do so many custom changes with our orders. And a lot of times now we require them to take images of their bride or of their mother. And the most issues come up with the mothers because their bodies are not this, not 20 years old anymore. And making sure so that way our pattern makers can see what they're actually measuring versus what they say on the paper they're measuring. And it's helped us catch a lot of mistakes. But then also the mom's like, I don't want to have my picture taken in my bra and underwear, so we have to make sure like no faces are in these pictures. We discard them, just the implications of like having these pictures in our hands.
Yep,
Yeah.
totally. Wild, like, weird,
Yeah.
wild times, guys.
Wild times.
I know. I keep getting the conversation keeps coming up about like 3D measuring people. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. But you're going to tell a 65-year-old billionaire to get in his shorts and take a picture of his body? That is never going to happen. Never. And like, it, there's also so many other implications, but it's like, yeah, that exact like the reality of just like, okay, get down to your underwear.
Yeah, the
And
reality
then
of
like,
that. Yeah, Matt, and just like we all sometimes have issues like when we are draping on a mannequin for like a new style or it'll fit one way on the mannequin, but as soon as we get it on our size 4 fit model because she's got flesh, her flesh and dense and like it can be a little off from the mannequin to the fit model. And so we got to take that in consideration. Like a mannequin, we're trying to look into mannequins that are a little bit more soft,
Yeah.
like
yeah,
almost made of silicone versus your typical mannequin so that it can just fit more like a human body.
you know
Uh,
what's so interesting?
so I'll keep
You
you
know
posted,
what's
Melissa, if we figure that out.
all
Please
right.
do.
Well, let's get an intro out of the way because
Okay.
I think the episode should start 5 minutes ago, and we'll like. For those just tuning in, Sean, please introduce yourself. Just your title and where you're calling in from.
Hi, everybody. I am Shawne Jacobs, and I'm the creative director and owner of Anne Barge, and I am in Atlanta, Georgia today. This is where our headquarters are located.
Wow. How's the weather down there?
It's chilly. I'm not gonna lie, it's cold right now for Atlanta. We
Yeah,
are
I
waiting
was
for it to warm up.
I was there 2 weeks ago, and it was the same week of Melissa's soiree, and so I was going from Connecticut to Atlanta to LA. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be such an easy trip to pack for, just all shorts and and I get to Atlanta and it was like 28 degrees. And I
You
was like,
so I was in Hawaii, Matt, when that happened. My kids had a fall break, so they were out of school for a week. So we darted out of Atlanta, but we got phone calls and they're like, it's gonna be 18 degrees in Atlanta. I'm like, man, did we did we miss that?
yeah, yeah, it was brutal. Like, thank God we were. I was down there for menswear collective
Okay.
trade show, and we were all in like the merchandise, like the top coats and everything.
That's too
It
funny.
was, yeah,
I was gonna actually piggyback off of you, Matt, and say, speaking of trade shows, so, Sean, I would love to know. I want to talk about the history and how you kind of came to the position that you're at with the company, but I also want to ask, like, how are you guys approaching like trade shows and the way that you are now looking at like marketing and getting your brand out there, given that you're kind of a mainstay and got a nice high status level in the market.
Thank you. We just celebrated 25 years in the bridal industry. So Anne Barge, the founder of this company, started in 1999. And so we celebrated that this past October. In the past, like when she founded the company, she always took the line to New York, which we still do today. That's our main market that we showcase our collections. We've always done two collections, one in October and one in April. And that market is for the trade. So that's where retailers, come to view designers' dresses. Nowadays, that's changed a little bit. Obviously, we have the press that comes in, but now we're starting to invite influencers coming to these shows so that they can, take images and videos and reels and all the things social media and blast it out there for us as well. So that's changed a little bit, or a lot actually, since the beginning. We also are trying to expand in the UK and throughout the EU. So now we are visiting the Barcelona bridal market, which is a huge bridal market in the world. And then we've dabbled a little bit in White Gallery and White Sposa in London. And yeah, so that's kind of the main markets that we show in. And I guess the biggest change for us right now is that we are really trying to focus on one bridal collection a year. And that will be the October bridal market for us. And then we will do a fill in bridal market. So this April, I'm only adding four new Anne Barge styles to the collection, and we'll add four new Blue Willow styles, which is our opening price point to the collection. I just personally feel we've been designing too much. And with all this talk over the last couple of years of sustainability and just our fashions footprint on sustainability, there's a lot of waste. And yeah, so we're trying to do our part in minimizing the wastefulness that we've been helping to contribute to. When I first started in bridal in 2002, the bridal markets were separated into seasons. So, you had your fall and winter collection, you had your spring and summer collection. And I think now, because of social media, I feel like bridal is just year round. And you could have a bride that buys her dress in the winter time, but she's getting married in Bali in the summer. And so she's not
Yeah.
wanting, heavier fabric. She's wanting something light. So because of that, I feel like the seasons, you know, dictated per bridal market is really unnecessary because of brides are getting married year round. So
I'm like keeping notes. This is like there's like so much to talk about there.
it's
Um,
running around. We're trying to get the bridal industry in the US to move this direction. There are a couple designers that are doing it as well. Some of us have chosen to make October our main market, and some of us have chosen to make April our main market. I know Sala, they are moving in this direction. Um, Mears Willinger from Israel is moving in this direction. So I hope it catches on.
I hope so too. It's so smart. It's gotta be a better business decision for you guys too, and I feel like it's probably better for the brides and the clients and the retailers because you don't have to require steep minimums. You don't
Yep.
like a purchase every market, which can get
Yep.
overwhelming, especially as brides are they can get price sensitive. Things can happen with the economy. Like, we just never know. Things can change so quick. I think it's so smart, not to mention the obvious benefit of the environmental footprint that you're having an impact on.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think I've already heard a lot of positive comments from our retailers. They love it, knowing that it's very expensive to fly to New York these days, and the hotels have become astronomical. And so for them to step out of their store and make, and travel to New York, it's a huge expense for them. The other thing that we hear is that we're pushing the trends too fast. Uh, bridal's different than ready to wear it in terms of trends, but it's almost like we're trying to keep up with the trends of ready to wear. And so it's moving too fast. So what we see happening is, as soon as we design a collection, the bride is saying, well, there's going to be another collection in 6 months. I want to see what that looks like. And it just creates this cycle where girls are, going into like 10 plus stores trying to see all the new dresses. So I think it'll help with that too. And just, I don't know. I think it's a really positive thing in our industry. So I hope more designers, you know, move in this direction.
I think it's brilliant.
yeah, and it's also well, the obvious counter to it is places like H&M, Zara, Shein that have 52 collections,
Yes.
a year. It's like
I could not even imagine. That would make my head explode.
yeah, like it's and yeah, exactly. It's makes no sense. And so for me, I'm a custom clothing. So I've got 2 trade shows a year. Um, but the custom clothing industry is interesting because it's almost like we basically just go for the camaraderie.
Mhm.
Like, because there's no new models, like, it's not new clothing that's coming out. The fabric houses come out with some new stuff, but it's really just we gotta go more for ourselves as an industry to get to know
Yeah.
each other, but that's I thought that was really cool, but I also think that it's really interesting, your approach of sustainability, because for me and, like, the custom clothing, same thing, it's like we're trying so much to really focus on that sustainability approach and just less is more. You don't need all of these options. You just need like the one right choice,
Yep.
and measuring and slowing the whole process down. And I think the more we have different industries singing that same song, that's where the change really happens, because I could jump up and down for the rest of my life and say it, but if people not everybody can afford a $3,500 suit. So
Right.
it's not going to make that much change. But if the dad is hearing it, and then his daughter getting married is hearing it, and like
Mhm.
that's where it really changes the fashion industry, I think.
I could agree more.
So, Shawne, I wanted to kind of backtrack for a quick second just to educate the listener a little bit on how you came into the role that you currently have now, because you're not the original founder of Anne Barge. But so,
No.
what did that look like for you to start and get to where you are today, and tell us a little bit about that process.
I feel like I have a little bit of an unusual story. I went to college for fashion design. I actually started out in architecture. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, was cheering. And my sophomore year, I was like, I don't think I want to go in this realm, but I was that kid that took every art class from kindergarten through a senior in high school. So I knew I wanted to do something um, around art or drawing. I was always sketching. My mom taught me how to sew. So I was making, as I before high school, making my dolls, their clothes and the Barbies, the dresses that they were wearing. And as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and this is going to sound funny, but back then, there was 17 magazine. I'm flipping through the magazine in the back of the classified section. There was an ad for FIT in Parsons. And it was like this light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And then my parents squashed that dream. They were like, our daughter from Louisville, Kentucky is not going to go to New York all by herself. We laugh about it now because I'm up there at least once a month um,
Mhm.
with work. And so we researched other fashion design schools and we found one in Atlanta. And my mom and I drove down, and she was comfortable with me living here by myself. So majored in fashion design and marketing. And then after college, I did a little bit of traveling and came home. And my dad's like, okay, it's time to get a job and what you set out to do. And there was an opening at Anne Barge in the shipping and receiving department. And so I was just excited to find something in fashion here in Atlanta because I always imagined I would have to move to New York, to LA, possibly Miami. And went to the interview, got hired, started working part time, 3 days a week in shipping and receiving. And I thought I was in heaven. I was like, look at these gowns. I mean, like, I was excited to, just to handle them, ship them out, put them in boxes, and send them on their way to the store. And then just quickly throughout my 20s, because I started in 2002, the company was only 2 years old at the time. So as the company grew, my role in the company grew. When I started with the company, I was the third employee. And then, we had an employee that left, and I kind of like just naturally moved into her position. In the beginning, I enjoyed working alongside of Anne while she was working with the bride. And I feel like I really learned a lot from her in terms of sales, and then started going on trunk shows and working with the stores that we sell to. And then because the company was so small, I was really able to be a part of so many different areas, whether that was when we were doing photo shoots or the gown production part or the ordering part. So I really kind of had my hand in a lot of things. And then again, as we grew, I kind of grew with the company. In 2014, my husband and I purchased Anne Barge. Anne had approached us a year prior. She wanted to be able to retire, but have somebody continue her legacy. And along the line from kind of when I started, she would always ask us to, if you were sketching a wedding dress, what would you design? And she really, looked at our sketches, there's about a 30-year age difference between Anne and myself and some of the other girls I was working with. So she really valued our opinion since we were the age of the bride getting married. And I remember the first sketch, it was about 2 years later after starting to work for the company. My first sketch that she said, you know what, I'm going to put that on the line. And then going forward, I would contribute to, designing the collection, with her being the creative director and the editor and making the final decision. So when she asked us to purchase the company, I think she really felt comfortable with me taking the company forward, designing, and her stepping back. And then my husband has an entrepreneurial business background, and him, being the CFO of the company and continuing her legacy. So, and that takes us, to kind of where we are today. So we've owned the company for 10 years now, and it it seems like it's been long, kind of like having children, right? They say the days are long and the years are
Right?
short. That's
Sure.
exactly how this is.
That is so true. It's so funny too that like I relate to one of the first things that you were talking about too, like being so excited just to find something in your own backyard because
Mhm.
I felt the same way. Like I remember I went to FIT and thinking like, well, I'm never going to get a job in fashion outside of New York City. Like what on earth am I going to do? I'm going to be stuck in a retail job. This is going to suck. And I really had like almost a moment of regret of like, what I have this degree. What am I going to do with this? I knew I didn't wanna spend my life in the city and, there were more opportunities in my area, and then the opportunity for me to create my own opportunity arose, and that's a
Yeah.
different color, but I think there's just something to be said to anybody out there listening who isn't sure or feeling like they can only do their one thing in the one area or whatever. I think it's so untrue, especially nowadays and kind of that broadening through the internet, stuff like that. I think that's a very positive message to put out there for sure.
How about
And
the two
oh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Well, how about the two personal connections, Melissa? I saw your eyes light up just like I did. So, Sean, you're the third woman in bridal that we've talked to who got started in architecture.
Thinking about our
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Like, we were just talking about, we're like, wow, what a weird coincidence that these two people got started in architecture, huh? And then you like this conversation happened like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And
That's
now
crazy.
here you are. So I don't know. There's got to be something there. It's kind of like how a lot of history majors also become lawyers. Like there's probably
But it's like constructing a dress. It's. I feel
yeah.
like it's. Oh, and with pattern making, there's a lot of math that's involved with it. It is basically you are like the architect of putting that dress together. I mean,
Yeah.
both of you with your background, I
Yeah.
can see where that draw comes from.
Yeah, and then the second funny personal thing is that Melissa and I met each other, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago. I can't do the math. But we went on a mission trip. It was kind of like a Habitat for Humanity, but
Yeah.
run out of a church in Connecticut. And we happened to go. We didn't know each other. We were like 15 or something, Kentucky, which I think is like yeah, which I think is like 40 minutes away from Louisville. Like
Yeah.
I,
It is.
I flew out of Louisville one time because I had to leave the trip early. I had to leave the trip early to go to my brother's wedding or something like that. And we flew out of Louisville. So how crazy is that? That we met on that trip building again architecture. So there's definitely something there. Um, but that is really interesting. But I related to you so much about what you talked about, this kind of informal apprenticeship, we'll call it, because I had a very similar situation where I was working at a boutique store and it was just me and the owner. And so, I got started 20 something hours, like I didn't really know what I was doing. That was my fourth retail job at the time. I was already like 10 years in the industry. But when I was there, I started getting a hand in. I would go to the trade shows and they'd ask, "What do you think is gonna sell, this or this?" And I was like, "What? Me? Like, I don't know. The blue one, I guess." Like, yeah. But then that I would go to every trade show every single time that there were um sales reps coming to the store. I was included in the buying process and sizing it out, and that alone totally just opened my mind to, fashion is way more than just looking pretty on a runway.
Mhm.
That business side of it, making the decisions on sizing and what's gonna sell and that forecasting, that really piqued my interest. And then I got into the custom clothing. It was a segment of that store, but it was only maybe 20% of that store's
Okay.
revenue. And I kept trying to build it up, but there was a want to cap it. Um, and that so I left in 2020 to start Bards and my own clothing company, and that's only custom. And I chose, all right, I know what manufacturers I want based on my relationship with that store. I was like, well, they sold kind of everything. I really want all my clothing to be made in America. I
Mhm.
really want to choose a few manufacturers, not have 20 different people. So I
Yeah.
have, I got started with two factories, one in New York and one in New Jersey, one for clothing, one for shirts. Now I have four. So
Okay.
to have a little bit of a different price tier, three in New York and one in New Jersey. Um, but it really did start from that informal apprenticeship of just like I loved everything about learning and I never want to take that away. But I was like, I would do this differently a little bit.
And it does, like, everything that you learn, you're able to see it from afar, basically, right? As and there were definitely changes, that I saw that or that we made when we purchased the company that we felt like would be better going
Mhm.
forward. Because I was able to kind of see it from afar,
Yeah.
like not being the person in charge at that point, or not the person that
Right.
owned it. And
Yeah.
it helped me to be able to watch that for a period of time. And one of the best experiences that I had is when we went through the recession, and seeing how Anne handled that, like, with, on the business side of it, and how she got through that. This was for us, our at that time, our best year was 2008. It didn't hit Bridal until 2009. And then everybody's sales just tanked. I mean, if basically our sales fell in half. But watching her weather that
Yeah.
was so valuable to me going forward when we dealt with COVID. And
Yeah.
seeing, okay, we can get through this. I just need to put X, Y, and Z in place, or I need to also put ABC in place too, based on watching that, experience.
Right. Because it was only gonna last 2 weeks. So
Yeah,
let's just how
exactly.
So
Yeah,
that was
let's just
exactly what I wanted to ask you about was kind of transferring that extrapolating that information and maybe using it during the COVID times. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know what your manufacturing process was like pre-COVID, but what kind of changes? I understood that perhaps you shifted some things to make some garments more domestically. In
Yes, we have. So, when I first started working for Anne, all the Anne Barge collection has always been made in mainland China, and we really had to educate moms mostly, and a few brides about what that looked like. I think when people hear made in China, they think sweatshops, they think Nike t-shirts, and that is not the case of the factory that we have worked with. The current factory that we are with, we've been since 2008. It's 40 people in this factory, and they only made our line with, and at times, one or two other designers. They specialized in high-end garment making, wedding dresses, evening wear. These women were very skilled. They were not children. But they've been sewing since they were children.
Yeah.
And one thing that I loved when going to that factory and really realizes they would have, sewer A might be responsible for only 5 styles of, 40 styles that we're making in that factory. But because she was only responsible for those 5 styles, she knew those styles like the back of her hand. When we had tried to manufacture in New York for us, Matt, we found in the factories that we worked with in New York, depending and working on bridal gowns, Susan could come in Monday and then Jenny comes in Tuesday and finishes the dress. There wasn't like a consistency.
Right.
And And Melissa, as you know, like if a lace flower was here on the sample that she tried on, and all of a sudden it got moved to here, she she knows, and she's like, something's not right. Let me go back to the
Right.
picture of when I tried this dress on. This is not right. So for us, that was really important. And I feel like one thing that we're known for in the bridal industry is our fit and our construction. And that was all done at a very high level in mainland China. Then COVID happened. And we didn't really have a disruption in China, but we had a disruption in Vietnam. Vietnam makes all of our Blue Willow bride dresses, which is our opening price point. And the government there shut down the country for 3 months, nothing in, nothing out. And that was a really scary time because we had to decide, were we going to send our retailers an email saying, I'm sorry, we have to cancel this bride's order, which were hundreds, or did we pivot? And I found another manufacturer in China to take those orders and trying to get the patterns to them, the fabrics to them. All of this was locked up in our factory in Vietnam. It was not a fun time. There were many nights where we had staff up in the middle of the night, talking to this new factory that we're trying to work with to get these brides dresses. Many tears were shed, and because of that, I was like, okay, we can't have our hands tied next time something like this happens. Anne had always wanted to try to do manufacturing in the US. That's why we had tried it a couple times in New York. It just didn't work out for us. But I was like, let's try this again. And I happened to have a girl send me her resume from New York. They were relocating, she and her husband, from New York down to Atlanta. And she had bridal manufacturing management skills. And we just don't usually find those type of skills down here. And so I was like, I don't really have anything, but why don't you come in? Let's just talk. And as she's talking, my wheels are turning. And after she left, I called our landlord. I was like, is that space next door available? Because I'm going to turn it into a factory. And so that's how it started. And so that was, I guess, about 2.5 years ago. And now we are manufacturing. I would say now half of our Anne Barge line in the domestic factory here in Atlanta. And one of the biggest challenges for us is finding sewers, and
Yep.
not just sewers that can hem a pair of jeans. I feel like both of you know with doing custom suits and the tailoring and wedding
Yep.
dresses, it's really finding a sewer who has that background, and then also being able to be patient and take the time with sewers that don't necessarily have that background, or that have, for us, we have found a lot of sewers that have worked at David's, but now showing them how we sew and how a higher level luxury goods are put together versus faster fashion. And so that takes time. So each season we increase the number of styles, and our goal is to eventually move, all of Ambarge here. And unfortunately, as much as we have valued the factory in mainland China, we would like to move out. We're dealing with tariffs and just economic uncertainty, and it's just becoming much more expensive to manufacture there, even though the quality is there.
Yeah, I wanna let's put a pin in the tariffs because that's
Yeah.
an obvious
Yeah.
obvious hot topic.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that, but yeah, the resonating with the struggle of, like, what COVID was, and even things that so for me in my factory in Rochester, it's
Okay.
made on, a line where it sounds like your factory in China does something similar. The person who makes pockets is the person who makes pockets.
Yep.
That's what they've done for 40 years. The person who attaches the sleeve head, that's what they are a master of. Then what happens when that person gets COVID and is out for a month or goes back home and never comes back?
Yes.
Our factory was decimated. I
Oh,
mean, there were times where we had like 13 people out on a 60-person team, and then the other person next to them has no idea what to do. So then you're trying to cross train, which slows everything down. It was such a nightmare. Garments were taking 18, 22 weeks. And there was a price increase because everything in the world got expensive. So then it was like, well, I'm not getting the garment I want. And now it's worse because the person who's good is gone and it's taking forever and it's double the price. It
right.
was a logistical nightmare. And then wherever the fabric was coming from, Italy or something, things
Mhm.
got stuck in customs, and that wasn't a us problem or a mill problem. That was a customs problem. And it's like, well, now we have no idea what to do.
Right? You have no control, and that's hard. I feel like retailers and brides sometimes, we can tell them like it's in customs right now, and they're upset. And we certainly understand, but I'm like,
Yeah.
there's nothing that we can do. It is
Yeah.
like it's like jail for shipping, right? It's like
Yeah. Exactly. Like dodgeball waiting to come back in.
Right? Yeah. Funny. So I really wanted to that is now the time, Matt? Are we segueing into the tariffs conversation?
Yes, yes, definitely. Yep.
oh gosh.
It's obviously still kind of new, right? Like this is just being implemented. I feel like even as it's being implemented, there's going to be steps forward, steps backwards, amendments to all the rules and all the things. But what is it like for you currently?
Mhm.
What's happening? What are you seeing? What's impacting you guys? And how is that like affecting how you're going forward with business?
Sure. It's been interesting with these last, not the 10% for us that was just added again, but the previous 10% a couple like a month ago. We sent out a letter to our stores letting them know here's the price increases on wholesale, which also increases the prices on retail. Uh, but it was interesting to me how so many people didn't understand how tariffs work in business. So if we back up in during the current administration's first term, there were tariffs that were put on goods coming out of China as well. And so we had absorbed an additional, at that time, it was 10% and additional 7%. And then the 10% got taken away, and then it was just an additional 7%. And then when the Biden administration came in, they did not take those tariffs away either. I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, they see this extra money coming in. They're like, well, why are we going to get rid of this? But there's there are tariffs put on any goods being imported into the United States. And so typically, depending on what the garment is made of, so in our Anne Barge collection, the majority of the fabric is silk. So it has a specific tariff that is associated with silk fabric. And then if the garment is synthetic, then it has a different tariff that is associated with that fabric. But when the additional tariffs come in from our government, it adds on to those percentages already. So right now with what's happening as of today, there's an additional 20% tariff being added to our garments coming out of China being imported into the United States. And that affects the consumer. So that gets passed on to the consumer. So that will be passed on to the bride. And so that's where it seemed like there was a confusion. I had, some people contact me and they said, well, why aren't you as a business eating this? And I was like, that's not how business works.
Yeah.
That's not how tariffs work. And they thought they were having to eat it. And so explaining to them, no, you're still getting your same markup. It's the consumer, it's the
Right.
end, consumer that's having to pay the additional tariffs. And you're right, it changes. We're in a waiting period right now to kind of see what's going to happen.
Just for clarification, Sean, just for
Yes.
clarification, Sean, do you wholesale dresses?
Yes. So the majority of our business, Matt, and it has since 1999, has been selling to other bridal retail stores.
Oh,
So we
wow.
sell to retail stores throughout the United States and then also internationally. And then we have two
Gotcha.
flagship stores, one here in Atlanta and then one also on Madison Avenue in New York. And then we sell to brides directly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, then that puts you in a wild position. Um, yeah.
It's been a fun little ride.
Yeah. The factory that I'm using right now is we have a sister company in
Okay.
China.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, the conversations, I use that factory, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a year for like a
Yeah.
friend, I'll make something. Um, so I get all the emails and I just saw something that was saying, "Okay, we're gonna split the tariff with you
Hmm.
temporarily
Hmm.
because we don't know what it's gonna be like."
Right.
and they're like, "We're just gonna kinda see how it goes, as it might just be a scare tactic, so starting this week going forward, all tariffs, the 20%, factory will incur 10, they'll pass 10 along, and then in the summer, they're gonna revisit it, and they'll probably pass the full 20 on to the seller,
Right.
because you can't just eat that again and again." I mean,
It's not
it's
I
n
would love if my factory would come to me and say, "Hey, we still wanna do business with you, so we'll split it with you," but they have
yeah.
not been generous in that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and, it's tough because it's not everybody's in that position, not everybody it's not even that they don't want to, it's like, to your point, that's not how business is done. This is this is how it is. There's a tariff, okay, you pay for it,
And you
you
also
know, and,
I was gonna say, and you also expect a certain margin at the end of the day,
yes.
and if you've been operating for so long on how much you're paying your employees, what's getting reinvested in your business, and these things come up very rapidly, like I was making the joke, like, do you have whiplash? Because it's in,
Yes.
up, it's down, like, it changes every other minute, and it's gotta be hard to plan long-term financially because of that, and that's hard to do as a business owner because you're especially in what we do, we're planning for collections far ahead, we're anticipating
Yeah.
needs of the consumer, the end consumer, as well as the retailer, like, there's so much thought into it and so much financial burden that can happen, especially because you're incurring these costs up front. You have to get all this product somewhere down the line and make it work.
Mhm. Yes, and I feel like also another big topic that as a whole in the US that we need to speak about in our industry specifically is, the consumer is wanting things made in America. And I certainly it's much easier to have it made here because my eyes are right on it. I'm not having to
Right.
travel, 22 hours on a plane to go visit the factory. So I definitely want to see it made here, but it's also finding the talent here that can sew at that level and the training that it takes. And Matt, I don't know if you have experienced this with your factories in New York, but I hear it all the time that the fashion industry in district in New York just keeps shrinking in
Yeah.
terms of the sewing factories that are up there. And we can say all day long that we want things made here, but if we don't have the workers that are skilled in those areas, it's not going to happen. I always say to even when we were talking about China, I would educating the mom, I would ask her, and Melissa, you're an exception. But I would say, the women that you're taking your clothing to have altered, who's owning who runs that that alterations business? It's all immigrants for the
Yeah.
most part that have that skill. And so then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So I know there's also that big topic button right now about immigration and having people come into the US, but and being able to do certain jobs that not everybody wants to do. And then the
Yeah.
other thing that we've talked about here in Atlanta is I feel like some of the fashion schools they focus on just being a fashion designer. And and if you're not a fashion designer, you're not going to make it. And that is so wrong because there's so many different jobs in the fashion industry that people can be successful at, be great at, and they don't have to be the fashion designer. But we have a person that works in our our domestic production factory, and she really wanted to be a sewer. She wants to be great at sewing and at a very high level. And she was graded on more by her designs and what the school wanted her designs to be versus versus the quality of her work. And so they kept pushing her in that direction, and that's not where she wanted to be. But I think if the schools look at fashion as a business and figure out different areas, and I feel like if they just kind of change their mindset, I feel like it'd be much more beneficial to the students that are going to fashion design school.
Absolutely. I feel like a
I
lot of
feel like that, whole speech should just be on
that's the mission for life.
I yeah,
I
yeah, literally, that's like the Meryl Streep cerulean sweater speech.
we quote that all the time, man. So I feel like
Go
too
ahead, Melissa.
it becomes a like a chicken and egg situation. Like, what has to come first in order to beget these results that we want? And I feel like we're in this holding pattern now where traditionally people who are factory workers, skilled laborers have had, whether it's true or not, but there's a preconceived notion that you don't make a lot of money or that you're in shitty conditions, things like that. And so we're shifting that perception and that narrative of like, okay, domestic production in particular, we've got minimum wage requirements, we've got, workers' rights and protections, we've got, maybe you've got unions and all this stuff. And I think it's shifting that mindset, first of all, of what it looks like to be a professional sewer, and then
Mhm.
getting the buy-in from the next generation of this is possible. You can make a wonderful living, you can have great quality of life, you can own your own business, you can work for someone else. And then at the same time, we get to like save the planet. Thanks. So many benefits.
So many benefits. Yes. We always joke with the girls I have sewing. We have one guy and he's our cutter, but he's everybody that's worked at another place and then they come here to sew, they're like, "Oh my God, we have windows." And they can't believe they had windows. They're like, "You don't know how much."
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
like, "Gosh, okay, it's the little things, right?" Like
Yeah. No, and to your point that you brought up earlier, Sean, our factory in Rochester, I'll keep referring to that one, because it makes all my tailored garments. We have one of the youngest average ages of pretty much any factory in the country. I think the
that's
average
amazing.
age is like 56 or something, which is insane. But the issues are, as you mentioned, one, uh, that the knowledge doesn't exist in this country. There's nobody teaching them. But then the people who do know are pretty up there in age. It's not a sustainable business to keep just getting these like 70-year-old people to get the work done.
Right.
And then the third struggle is, yes, the immigration. We have, I think the last time I heard it was 92% of our tailoring staff is international. Like they're immigrants and we love it. We welcome it. We want it. We
Yeah.
actually, my factory partnered with a local community college to bring in tutors to help teach them English, because
Ah, I love
then
that.
then the other issue becomes no one can talk to each other, you know. So
Yeah.
because we've got people from Mexico and Kuwait and Afghanistan and
Uh-huh.
Zimbabwe and all these, so then if there was an issue you just hold up a pair of pants and yeah.
They're like pointing. I often hear the phone. It's like Google Translate that's going on in the room.
Yeah,
They can
exactly.
talk to each other or
Yep, exactly.
y-
So like that becomes a whole other, so now the factory needs to incur that cost of like teaching these and taking time away to teach them English. But it's like,
yeah,
it's not an incurred cost because in the end of the day, like we enjoy it. We at work,
yeah. So
we're
you
happy to do it.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
but it is like these are the hurdles in America. If you want to make a factory in America, this is the landscape that we have to deal with. It's almost like when you brought up people only getting trained in fashion design, it kind of reminded it's like if people went to culinary school and they were only taught how to plate food,
Mhm.
it's like you still need to know how to cook. Like you need to know how to
Exactly.
make the food.
Exactly.
Making it look pretty is fine. Yeah, that's like the luxury, but you have to know these real skills. And yeah, at our factory, it's a struggle, but we've got about 60 tailors. The most recent person that we brought on was like 22 years old. And it was such a like a breath of fresh air, just like,
Yeah.
all right, if there's one, there's more,
Yes.
and we can kind of find it. Um, But shit, it brought up something else I did wanna bring up. Oh, oh, yeah, you said the word cutter, and I was
Mhm.
thinking about this earlier. Did you ever watch the movie The Outfit?
I don't think I did.
So, it's a Peacock movie, and it's like a mafia drama. It's based on a play, so the whole thing
Okay.
takes place in a tailor shop, in Chicago, and it follows a guy who's a tailor, and the mafia keeps coming in because that's where they meet their, they do their deals or whatever. And they keep referring to him as a tailor. And this guy came over from Britain. He was on Savile Row, and he keeps saying, "A tailor is somebody who hems pants. I'm a cutter." And like that, even knowing that, many people don't know. And we
Yeah.
use tailor as kind of just a sub word, kind of like bespoke. Like now, a true tailor, a true bespoke, it's so watered down now. We just say these words, but
We
like a
do.
cutter,
Mhm.
a draper, a pattern maker, these are all different people.
And they're trained in very specific things. So Carlos is our cutter, and he knows how to save so much fabric wastage by
Right.
just his knowledge on how to lay out the pattern. Well, if we lay it out this way, we can save, a fourth of a yard, or and all of
Right.
those details matter. Just and also just knowing fabrics and how they work, or in terms of cutting, if it's like a chiffon or something soft versus like a Mikado, I need to treat it this way as I'm cutting the pattern out. But it's very specific things that he is familiar with compared to, let's say our pattern maker that's draping on the mannequin, and then also, drafting everything out on paper. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so cool. I just did that this morning. I do a muslin fitting for all my clients first
yeah.
because I'm like, this is expensive fabric. We need to
Yep.
order the right amount. And I mean, I took a ton out of the sleeves. I took a ton out of the midsection. I think this gentleman lost a bunch of weight, but this when you are actually hands-on in the production,
Yes.
these are the things that matter. Saving a fourth of a yard, it's not just economics, it's also good for the environment because that's less stuff that
Yep.
needs to get flown around, and also just more sustainable. It's a little bit more zero waste. Like I get a bag after every garment is made, I get a bag of the leftover fabric, and it literally fits into this like tiny little envelope. But I get to keep it for whatever reason I need to. So, but
Yeah.
it's just a little bit. So I really respect that approach that you're taking.
Shawne, do you
Thanks.
find that you're keeping pace with your goal as far as expanding the factory, or do you feel like it's getting a little stifling because of that lack of talent?
It definitely has become a little bit more stifling because we now are experiencing where visas have been canceled within the last couple months. And these were immigrants that came into the country from um, Venezuela, some South America, and some other South America and Central American countries that had, green cards or visas. Sorry, not green cards, but had visas to work. And those visas have been canceled, and so they have now a certain amount of time left on that visa, and then they'll have to go back to their home country. So now we're dealing with those staff shortages and knowing that's coming down the pipeline and trying to research how to begin the process of applying for work visas for them and sponsoring them so that they can stay. Um, yeah, so that's in addition to like not finding the sewers, and then we have some. We have one sewer. It was so cute. She came to the door, knocked on it, came unannounced, but just knocked on the door. And she said, I could sew. Here's my papers to work. She wanted to work so bad in the sewing industry, didn't, and had she made it to Atlanta and found us researching, and she's one of our most talented seamstresses.
Yeah.
And she is unfortunately one of the ones whose visa has been canceled now. And so just trying to find their replacements have been tough.
It's so interesting too, and these are the things that, like, I'm so glad that we can have this conversation and just put that type of information out there, because these are the things that consumers and the general population just don't understand. You are actually facing these challenges. It's not just like buzz clips and political innuendo that you hear on the news. Like it's the struggle of like real businesses just trying to keep it all together and keep
Keep
their
it all together, making it work, right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah, and
yeah,
you
if
hear
I could speak to the administration, whether it's the former one or this one now, it's like, help me do business here in the US.
right. Yes, that and like you hear this stuff about um if you get rid of all the immigrants, who's gonna work the farms? And it's like, yeah, but also who's gonna be in the factories because they're also here, just like other Americans, working these very real jobs. Like, there's such a short-sighted knowledge on what these things do. And it's like, yes, to your point, it doesn't matter if it's this administration or the last administration, you're making it worse. You're making it harder because we also have a very real problem where people are not taught the trades in this country. So if you get rid
Yes.
of everybody who does have that knowledge, you're left with just Americans who don't know this stuff. Like like bottom line, that's what it is. And like I said, 90 something percent of all my factories are people from other countries. It's because that knowledge does not exist here. And we were talking to we actually had my shirt factory owner on a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago, and fascinating conversation. And he and I agreed. We're like, we love the idea of the tariffs, but if tomorrow everybody wakes up and decides, "I only wanna buy American," that cannot happen. The industry, the
Right.
infrastructure does not exist here.
Right.
Even like little things like we can't get thread here, or, we can't get buttons. He brought up buttons, and there's things about the tariffs were originally made to protect industries in America, but this
Right.
industry doesn't
Right.
exist. So it's like, why are we
Right.
getting tariffed? You're not protecting anything. You're just making it more expensive and now getting rid of the labor force who can do the job.
Right.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. I feel like just 60-second or 90-second reels are not going to do this conversation justice.
Worth of clips of
Yeah, exactly. It's just the whole grid is Sean's face.
Um,
Melissa, do you got any final thoughts? Because we have taken up way too much of Sean's time. And I also love the thing that's in the background, whatever's moving around back there over your head.
oh, that's our conveyor belt. So those are all wedding dresses that are waiting to be shipped out to brides
That's
to the
so cool.
to retail stores that then passed on to
Yeah.
their customers. But we took the dresses off the floor to alleviate space on the
oh,
to give us more space on the floor.
so to the listener who's
Yeah.
always been the listener, now you have to watch her. Go to YouTube, find and see this awesome conveyor belt. It looks like the dry cleaner. It's very cool.
Exactly.
So, Sean, I did want to ask you actually kind of out of left field, what's another, it doesn't have to be in the bridal industry or the wedding industry. What is another like small business that just comes to your mind that you love, you want to support, you think they're doing a good job? Who's somebody that you would shout out?
Gosh. Put me on the spot, Melissa. I feel like there's so many businesses. Complete opposite of bridal. I have three boys, so I'm a mother of three boys, which is really kind of ironic with the industry that I'm in. They all play baseball. But I have been super impressed. I think they just like the social media algorithms just follow me. Like they can hear me talking about baseball with my children, and I've been super impressed. There's two like small startup baseball fashion brands that have started from scratch. Like, there was a kid that played baseball in high school and started his own fashion brand called Baseball 101 that if you see a kid in this brand, you recognize it right away. It has to do with like ice cream, and now you're going to hear like elementary and middle school like terminology with boys and like drippy clothing. But it's been fascinating watching these two baseball brands from starting in a basement and how they've grown and have gone viral on TikTok and YouTube and have become fascinated with these young boys.
That's really cool.
That's so cool. It is wild how the algorithms do here. The other day I was
Scary.
complaining about it is. The other day I was complaining to somebody about the size of my head and I can never find sunglasses. And today I got an ad for sunglasses and it was
Oh
like,
God.
you got one of those giant heads and can't find sunglasses? I was like, all right, like at least be subtle about it. Like, you're just calling me out on my, like, Easter Island size head,
Now you have sunglasses that are going to be made just for
I was all
you.
mad. I was like, fine, well, thank you. I'll buy them, but I'm not gonna like it.
Product, thanks.
Yeah, it was rough. Well, Shawne, thank you so much. This conversation truly was like so amazing to hear from it from your perspective and what it's like. It sounds like we got to have you back on to talk about this more. There were so many things I wanted to ask. I like, what's it going to look like for the future and everything, but it also sounds like a lot of that's uncertain. So,
Yeah.
and we didn't even really talk about like trends in the bridal industry. So I would love
Well,
to talk
stay
about
tuned
that.
to Bridal Market in April. All the bridal designers will be flooding their Instagram handles, and social media with all the current trends that are going to be coming out. Um,
Beautiful,
I'm sure the
beautiful.
Basque waist is still up there
Yeah,
in trends, and it's funny for me. Starting in 2002 and now 2025 is how trends have all come full circle. So
yeah,
the Basque waist was very popular in the early 2000s and now seeing it become trendy again and girls saying,
yeah,
"Oh, this is so new." And I'm like, "Is it?"
yeah.
It's just more modern, right? It's done more modern than how it was done back then. Well,
Yes,
kids were
yeah,
born in
exactly.
2000.
Yeah, and
Yes.
like, even in suiting, wider lapels are becoming back
Yes.
in, but the reason it's updated is because it's a higher button stance. And I always love looking at these old movies where the button stance is almost
Nice.
at the waistline. I mean, like at the pant waist. It's so low. And I've even seen people like with their button stance below the pant waist, which so yeah, it's a higher, but yeah, those trends are very cyclical. But Shawne, thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
such a pleasure.
We
Thank
appreciate
you. This was great. Now I'd love to come on in the future.
Yes, we'll absolutely have you. And thank you very much to the listener tuning in to another episode of the Fabric of America.